Chad, I thought we were friends. I know you were a huge fan of the movie Dog Soldiers, and I've known you for almost as long as this movie has been out. And you've talked about it and you've tried to, recommend it to me. But I feel there comes a certain time where there has to be like a movie intervention where you are so passionate about a movie that you are guaranteed a friend will love that you have to strap them down Clockwork Orange style and force them to watch it. And you never did that for me. I watched Dog Soldiers, Neil Marshall's 2002 masterpiece, on my own today and a little bit yesterday. And yeah, I feel like and it's a werewolf movie, so this is a pun. Where has this movie been all my life?
It's been out there. It creeps back in every full moon, and yeah, not only just a fantastic film, but his directorial debut. He had done some shorts, done a lot of editing, uh, written some stuff, but wow, for a first film, you and I have reviewed together in tandem, have reviewed some directors' first films, and we we've not always been excited by them,
Yeah.
or but this is the caliber of thought and script and acting and just all the elements combined. And when it comes right down to it, the story is fantastic because Marshall didn't want to make, oh, woe is me, I'm a werewolf and I have to go out and kill people against my will. He wanted to make a movie with military maneuvers and a incredibly terrifying, almost unstoppable enemy. And uh, werewolf movies are not easy to make. You know, he could have made a any kind of other horror movie. Could have made an alien style movie where aliens were attacking or vampires in the woods. But it was set in Scotland, not Fort Washington. So we can be glad of that. But to make a werewolf movie and your first film and to make it of such a high caliber with such a great cast. Yeah, I'm glad you finally experienced it because that's what I've been talking about all these years is just, a fantastic entry in the werewolf genre.
Now, how did you discover this movie? Did you see it in a theater first off? Was it like on a home video or, tell me about the first time you saw Dog Soldiers and what was it specifically that kind of knocked you out about it? Now, did it have any, because I know you have some, former military experience. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that too. Did it feel
Sure.
authentic? Is that one of the things you responded to?
Absolutely. As far as when I first saw it, it did not get any screen time in the US. I think it had a very short run in LA, maybe like a week or so. But other than that, I believe it was on Sci-Fi. Now, did I see it on Sci-Fi or did I, you know, 2002, there were still video stores that, not a lot of video, but a lot of DVDs. And I might have rented it the first time, but like a good friendship, I don't honestly remember the first time. I don't remember how we met, but it, I just, that first time viewing it, I was like, I didn't expect much. Um, Unfortunately, werewolf movies, we grew up with some really good ones, but then there were a ton of others that were almost made for TV caliber. So, not seeing this on the big screen, my expectations were not high, and I don't think that helped the film at all as it normally would because it didn't need help. Um, right away, it's kind of got two openings. We have a little bit of a setup of some campers were attacked by an unseen predator in the woods. Then we cut to a kind of a black ops military testing maneuver. and we're introduced to the two central characters, one being private rank, but testing for this black ops unit, and then the other being the captain of said unit, who their personalities are very polar opposite. And it's such a beautiful setup. Just, you think having maybe two intros and then finally getting to present day, here we go, the movie started. It's so seamless though. And we get everything we need for just a beautifully bookended film with a lot of great military camaraderie packed in between. A lot of fantastic action. There are some suspenseful parts. Also the jump scares. My favorite horror film is The Descent, which is Neil Marshall's next film after Dog Soldiers, and you can kind of see some elements that work well in Dog Soldiers expanded upon in The Descent, and one of those are just fantastic jump scares that even when you know they're coming, you're so caught up in the character development and what's happening on the screen because it's so natural through the writing and the acting, and then boom, something dramatic happens, and it's you really put yourself in the place of the characters and go, yeah, that is tense. But I think that's that and the werewolf design. Um, these aren't goofy looking werewolves. They're not completely wolf like. They're not superhuman like. They're really a great hybrid. And instead of going big, bulky, um, one of Marshall's friends, as he was writing it, had supplied just a sketch very similar to what you see in the film. And then Marshall, once he started assembling a team, his costume creator, special effects person, Bob Keane, I want to say, he built these just gorgeous outfits. And these are very elegant, very dog-like, yet anthropomorphic creatures that are terrifying, but yet gorgeous at the same time, which you kind of wonder, like, well, if you were to wander outside on a moonlit night and you encountered a werewolf, if you wouldn't be like, oh my god, I kind of want to pet you, or just stand here and oogle how perfect this creature is and how beautiful it is, really. So um and yeah, just a good combination of humor and tension, so that interplay of being able to laugh, either following a dramatic piece or um the build up to it. Just everything about this film I respect and enjoy. For I'd say I watch it at least once a year since I discovered it, which I think was 2002 or 2003. So
Wow. So yeah, you've seen this movie a lot, a lot.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Um, yeah, I mean that the creature design is, I think Marshall in putting this together, I don't know if it was a limitation of the budget or if this is a directorial choice. I'm fine either way because we don't see a whole lot of them. It's kind of the Spielberg Jaws thing where you see them in bits and in kind of shadow or leaping across the screen. When we finally do see them, there's a lot of them in sort of in silhouette. We do get a few, hero shots where it is fascinating because it looks, like the especially the heads look like, wolf heads, but kind of distended, like just slightly out of proportion and grafted onto these, humanoid bodies, not like they glued a werewolf mask onto a person, but just like something that looks natural that should not exist. And also not something that's so distracting, like with, you might say, like the xenomorph from Alien. It's a beautiful creature design, but as the movies went on, it seemed like they alternated between getting so, gooey and sloppy with like the slime that they would drape them in that you couldn't tell any features, to being so ornate. They're like, well, you're barely showing the things. Why are you bothering? This is like the perfect hybrid. Um, and you're right. The opening kind of thesis scenes, fascinating. You've got just the imagination in the first minute of these two campers making out in a tent. She no He starts unzipping her pants, like her orange pants, and you see the finger going down the zipper, and then it kind of stops because you hear another zipper like coming from somewhere else, and it's zipping down, and it's the werewolf outside unzipping the tent. And then there's the attack.
Very dainty eaters.
And
You don't
then we
want to
got,
go through it.
well, I was going to say, then we could talk about the werewolves, but um no, but then we cut to, because this is on like it's in Scotland in the Highlands, and then we cut to this military operation, but it's like the same night. I think it's happening, concurrently, or maybe it's no, it was a year earlier. There's a time jump, but it's the same area, right? Um, and you've got this military exercise, as you mentioned, and it all comes down to Cooper, who's our hero of the film, played by Kevin McKidd from Train Spotting and currently Grey's Anatomy. Um, but he gets into it with his commanding officer named Ryan, played by Liam Cunningham, who's just a wonderful, movie villain. And it comes down to a test of metal, whether or not Cooper will murder a dog. And he refuses. And Ryan's like, he said, I don't need men of conscience on my team, even if it
Yes.
comes down to just killing a dog. And of course, the dog gets it. And we cut to, sometime later, Cooper's in another unit and they're being called out like on an exercise. They're almost like, I don't know the military structure of Scotland or how it works, but I almost get the feeling like they're, not quite National Guards, but they've been called out for today to run this, this drill, and they're all talking about going back to catch the big football match and go home to their families and stuff. So they're not out in the battlefield so much. They're just, yeah, I got to get this over with. But
Right.
something goes horribly wrong. Uh, you mentioned the movie Alien. This movie has a lot of aliens and a lot of Predator, and I get the feeling that Neil Marshall was probably a huge fan of these movies and wanted to make his own genre picture with a different monster. And I think he 99% successfully takes all these elements from these other movies and melds them together into this pot and makes it original, even though it's got these familiar elements. And we'll talk about the 1% that I didn't really care for later, but it's so minuscule that I barely even want to bring it up.
Absolutely. I agree with you that um I definitely get the feeling that obviously when Private Cooper doesn't pass the test because he won't kill this innocent dog, a dog probably worth a lot of money to the military, that the captain is like, screw it, that's what I'm telling you to do. He ostensibly gets booted out into just, regular old military, and it definitely has a sense of that these aren't regular soldiers. They're not every day in the military. They are reservists or National Guard or something, the equivalent in Scotland or Great Britain, wherever they could have been sent to Scotland. We don't know, but um, the I agree. They do seem like about half of them are they don't want to be there. They just want to do this maneuver and go back home. And having been in those situations where, you know, you're a civilian, but you owe the military some kind of service, um, it it is hard to get your mind in there. And so, but that is the basis for so much good character development that it's just so effortless. You just get wrapped up into their banter, and so much so that when Marshall pulls the trigger on the first jump scare, it's it's just brilliant. It's I don't want to I again, I'm not familiar with how much we should be giving away. Do we assume people have watched it, or are we
Let's take it in half measures. We'll leave some things for
all right?
surprises, and we'll just talk
Very
about
good.
others.
So that first jump scare, just best going in without knowing anything, and yeah, you've got the military, and uh, British football comes up a lot.
It's a big
There's
match between England and Germany. Yeah.
Yes, which was an actual thing, and it's there was a full moon on September 1st of that year of that match, or September 1st or 2nd. So uh, I like that Marshall apparently, or someone on the team, must have went, let's just tie this into a real event, and kind of cool.
Yeah, very much so. You know, I don't know how exactly I'm supposed to experience this movie. And I feel like I should have talked to you about this years ago, as we've established, but it's one of those, great siege movies. You've got a bunch of people trapped in one location, like Night of Living Dead, Assault on Precinct 13, that kind of thing. There's weapons involved, there's an invading force that they're trying to stave off just for a few hours until they can escape, or until the sun comes up or whatever. Um, but what really sets this apart, I think, are the characters. When you look at Aliens or Predator, which I mentioned, those are primarily teams of like macho military people. They've got all the best hardware, they've got the badass attitudes. They don't, care about anything really. Whereas these guys being, I don't mean this as a derogatory term, sort of the weekend warrior type deal. They're not in combat, although some of the people, namely Sarge, played by the brilliant Sean Pertwee, the good Sarge, I should say,
Yeah,
of the good guys. He's seen some combat, and he tells, he's got a couple of, terrifying war stories under his belt. But you do get to know these people. As they get picked off, there are a couple of times when I was sitting there watching it thinking, am I supposed to be about to cry right now? Or am I supposed to feel like, in Aliens when they're just like blasting xenomorphs with their giant cannons, and, one of them gets pulled through the floor. Yeah, I felt bad for Hudson, but I'm gonna be a wreck in about a minute, when Spoons gets it.
exactly. These are the underdogs. They were firing blanks in their original military maneuver, and it's not until that they find the destroyed camp of the Black Ops unit that Sarge says, okay, from this point on, live ammo. This is
Yeah.
we have bodies. This is no longer a training exercise. Um, and I think if aliens, um, well, there were in um, in Aliens, we had someone with the team's best interest not at heart, operating within that group, and the same is true for the soldiers that are penned into this house, defending themselves from this werewolf pack. We have the Captain Ryan, is in with them, and very quickly goes from "we saved you and now we're all holed up here" to "you are now a prisoner. We don't trust you. You have something fundamentally to do with the situation we're in." And as things are revealed, it just makes subsequent viewings that much more enjoyable, because you start to look for, you know, there's knowing looks shot back and forth between characters. And there's I I when I watched it yesterday again, just kind of catch back up, and there really isn't a wasted scene. It's such it's an hour 40 minutes, and every scene has a purpose. It serves a purpose, whether it's character development, but typically if that's going on, there's something else going on at the same time, like drawing you into a lull for a moment of tension, or um, the fight scenes. There's so much going. And if you watch it again, I think you might be surprised by how much of the werewolves you actually see. But it takes a few showings because there are a lot of fast cuts, but in no way does it feel chaotic to me. So
Well, it
um,
yeah, it feels chaotic for the characters in the moment, but as far as the way it's filmed, I mean, there's a scene in the climax, and I'll spoil it, fine. But there's two characters who are backed into a room, and there's the wolves at the door, and there's a wardrobe, and they decide, let's get in this wardrobe. I'm like, what are you gonna do in there? And they don't know, but they're desperate. These
exactly.
guys, they don't have all the answers. They're literally like using their environment. At one point, I think it was spoons, but he's in the kitchen, he's throwing dishes and everything, and not like comically, but like you can feel the desperation. Like he wants to live, and if he can't live, he's gonna go out like literally fighting to his last breath. And he has one of the great, closing lines of any character in movie history. But these two characters in the wardrobe, once they're in there, they're trapped, and then the wolves get into the room. They're like, well, how do we get out of this? And the one guy uses the last few rounds of ammo to machine gun his way essentially through the floor, and they fall through the floor into this other situation. I mean, it's not since I think The Evil Dead 2 have I seen this great use of what it feels like a really small house that just becomes expansive because they go through every inch of it in this movie.
Right, right. And one of the props people built a little model of the farmhouse for Marshall to plan and just run through in his mind, where are the characters, where's the camera going to be. So it's no accident that it has that sort of continually, like, you know, I think a lot of movies you might get backed into a corner and that's it. You have to deal with it. But there's levels to the house, there's levels to the action and intensity. You mentioned Spoon. He steals the show for me. That guy, and look, in watching some of the preparatory filming they were doing, some of the behind the scenes stuff with the fight scenes. I don't know. There might exist another werewolf movie where a character goes hand to hand with a werewolf, but I would be willing to bet that this is the first. And then other people might have gone, "Oh, that's a cool idea." But this is a soldier who, like you said, he wants to live. He's plucky, and the actor himself. Let me see. I've got his name here because I don't remember his name all the time offhand, but um, he is just a bundle of energy. The way he moves, and he was actually sword fighting in one of the test scenes with a werewolf, and to see this huge, elegant werewolf be attacked by, it's like watching Yoda, CGI Yoda, where he's just springing around and moving around with this ginormous claymore, and it's just a delight, that and there is something inspiring about that because we're so used to seeing horror films where what's the trope? A character screams, Like, I'm not going to defend myself. This is it for me. I'll just scream. That's going to be my final act of defiance against a monster. This guy, like you said, he's throwing everything within arm's reach at this werewolf in the kitchen. And we don't know. That could be, I mean, that could be that kitchen's owner, that could be the matron of the pack, you
Because
know.
of what we find out about the occupants of the house and who these wolves are. And I don't know if you picked up on this, but it took me by surprise. We meet a character. The reason these guys get to the house is because they are rescued from the woods from the attack by Megan, um, who was played by Emma Cleesby. And you know, there again, I feel like there's like a visual homage to Aliens here because she ends up like in a white tank top and she's kind of got like the short dark hair, very much a Ripley character. But she's helping to defend off these attacks. She also seems to know more than she should. She's shooting knowing glances to Ryan. And eventually it comes out that there is a connection to these creatures, and that's all I'll say. But there is a moment where I think it was Cooper tells her how he knows what the connection is in relation to who took a certain photograph. And I was like, that makes complete sense.
Right. And yet that's all, it's a surprise, but yet it, uh this cover story she had of why she's there, how she knows everyone, that's all true. She's a zoologist, she's studying animals. We find out that she does have a connection to Ryan and the mythical beasts that are attacking this group of soldiers. So, um, again, going back to that core story is just so well thought out that there aren't a lot of holes
No,
that
and what I
I've
loved
been able
is
to find.
that I thought about this after it was over, but there's a scene where because Cooper, despite everything that he's seen, he's a skeptic pretty much up until he's come face to face with these monsters, and he's like, well, they have to be werewolf men. Um, but there's a scene at a table where she's talking to him, and she says, uh, if these are true, how are you ever going to sleep at night? Because there's a line between what I'm going to blow it, but essentially it's a line between, you think there are some things that are real and some things that are not. But once that line goes away, how are you going to sleep at night? What else could be true that you
Yeah.
think is crazy? And given what we come to find out about her, that makes me wonder. I mean, there's like sequel ideas all over the place because maybe she does know certain things about maybe other mythical, dangerous creatures, or maybe it's a self-contained story and that's fine. But again, it just opens up my imagination to the possibilities. There's a bit where Sarge, he's grievously injured in the woods, and they get him back to this farmhouse, and they have to patch him up with super glue. And they're saying, yeah, well, this was popularized in the Vietnam War as a method of patching up soldiers on the battlefield. And I was on a walk with the dog and the family this morning, and I was like, is that real? And I pulled out my phone. I was like, holy shit. And I almost swore in front of my kids. It's all
I
true.
thought you were going a different way with that. I thought maybe the dog attacked a squirrel and you were like, good thing I have my super glue. You just glued a little squirrel back to it. Like, look at that, it works. Got glue. It
Doing
works.
microsurgery on squirrel guts. No, that's not
Yeah.
that's not how I spent my morning.
Okay,
Um,
good. Good.
but again, even you know, there have been movies where people have had their guts, spilled out, and it usually ends pretty quickly for them. But in this movie, and it doesn't even feel unrealistic because they do as best they can in the moment until they get him back to the farmhouse. And then they're like doing operations on his guts. The one bit that I thought was a bit strange is there's a werewolf attack when they first get to this cabin, and in the middle of this attack, we see that Megan's dog is
Sam.
Sam is playing tug of war with part of Sarge's intestines.
Okay, but that's actually a note I had to make sure we talk about and clear up. That's if you if you pause the frame, it's actually one of his bandages, and
Oh,
that's a
okay.
been under discussion since the film came out. Of how did he, regardless of how he recovers, like if a dog's chewing on your innards, it's not going to go well. You're going to get sepsis at the very least, But no, it's one of the bloody bandages that the dog grabs, um, and that you came right up to the point of another favorite scene where uh, Sarge has been drinking whiskey to kind of kick down the pain a bit, and as they're super gluing them together, he's like, okay, the pain is getting through the booze. And he turns to Coop. But first, he starts smacking his private, or, then he follows up with like, knock me out, hit me. And so, in the fan lore, or according to the cast and crew, Coop hits him as he's laying in bed, and he Sarge flops over, and then a second later he pops back up and he insults Coop to the point, stirring him up again, and says, "Hit me, knock me out, like really hit me." And McKidd, the actor playing Private Cooper, it was supposed to be a pulled punch, of course, but he miscalculated and he actually hit Sean Pertwee in the nose. But both of them, like champs, like he just plays along. He falls over, allegedly passed out this time. And then Cooper immediately, and I don't know if this was scripted or if this was like, I just punched another amazing actor in the nose, but he immediately like checks his eyes and just to make sure that he's passed out and not uh, in any way seriously harmed. And it's just a little touch, but there's little things like that scattered throughout this movie that, um, when combined with the camaraderie that they actually experienced, that every one of the actors has said, like, we were a real unit. They just got along. They made a movie. It's amazing. So, um, all of that combined just make for a very believable film where sitting and watching it, you're like, yeah. Most films, I find I have to let go of that disbelief a bit because um, there's typically something that a character does where you're like, that doesn't seem very believable that a character would do that under those circumstances. But in this film, like, oh yeah, everything's pretty believable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much. I didn't see anything that I thought strained credulity. Like, well, the one bit is, and I feel like a lot of movies that involve like military or situations where there's scarce ammo, they fall into this trap. So I'll give Neil Marshall a bit of a pass. But at one point towards the end, they do the whole thing of like, well, how much time do we have left? And it's like, well, it's not so much the time, it's how much morale and ammo you have against these things. So they do it, they're counting all the rounds, like, yeah, we got 48, rounds left. And then there's like two scenes after that where they're machine gunning these things like crazy. And I'm not exactly doing the math, but I'm like, they should be dry by now.
Yeah, that would actually be interesting to count because I wonder if maybe, it sounds like a lot, but maybe they had it down to the number. I don't know. But Derek
And it
Morfitt.
oh yeah, he plays Spoon, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
Um
just put that in there.
no, that's fine. There was something, oh my gosh, I was going to bring up and I completely forgot what it was. How embarrassing.
Oh.
Um
I can I can jog your memory.
No, I'm totally I didn't freeze, just my brain froze. Yeah.
Okay.
Um
Well, you mentioned the family, and it's it's interesting because as much as I empathize for the soldiers, they're out on a bogus maneuver. Um, they shouldn't be there. Many of them meet a bloody demise at the hands of or the claws of werewolves, the teeth of werewolves. But this family where this house takes place, the Uas, um, I think there's five of them. We see a picture at one point, and pretty sure there's five members of this family. Um, I can't help but feel a little empathetic for them because they're not home, and even Sarge, the character of Sarge mentions it like we're in trouble. Burst into this house. We sleep in their beds. We eat their porridge. We just do all this stuff to this house, and now it's a battleground. It's ground zero for this werewolf siege, and everything is destroyed in this house. Ultimately, absolutely everything. But um, yeah, I do find that at some points I'm like, oh, I mean, there's a lot of nice stuff and a lot of history in this house. Like Spoon does find a claymore sword as he's going through things, and yeah, it's just something, an emotional reaction I didn't expect to have, but have always noticed. Like at some point in the film, I do feel a little bad that you know, soldiers will be soldiers, boys will be boys. They just come in with guns and start tearing things apart, destroying furniture, destroying the house, ruining all the possessions, going through all the possessions, looking, for silver, for anything to save themselves. So, um,
well, it's
yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up. And I did remember what I was going to say. I actually made a little note, so we'll get back to that in a second. But as far as the family goes, I think it was Megan that brought this up, is that, you know, and there was a joke about how it's, the time of the month, kind of a thing. But the idea that it is just a family who's been living in this house, and when there's a full moon, they go out and they hunt and they kill, campers or, wanderers or whatever, and no one ever finds anything except, blood, which, we've seen in other werewolf movies that there is a transformation back into people. And I was wondering about, you know, if they had, if everybody of all, man and creature had survived this night, what would have that looked like? Because it's entirely possible that the werewolf family wakes up and they're horrified and, sad about what they did, or they could be like, our Mr. Ryan, who's just kind of an evil bastard who, I don't think he enjoys being a werewolf, but I don't think he doesn't enjoy being a werewolf too. So yeah, again, it's just like these ideas that are kind of planted in the midst of this, hour and 40-minute, action horror movie that really got me thinking about the wider story of what this world that Marshall has built. It's just it's
yeah,
wonderful. Um, and something else that he did that I don't think I've seen before in another movie, and if you can think of examples, I'd be happy to hear them because it might jog my memory. But in siege type movies like zombie movies, I'm thinking specifically Dawn of the Dead, there's usually a character who gets bitten by the zombie, and then it's just like it's the time, the countdown to when are they going to turn, who's going to be the person to put the bullet in their head, will they be able to do that, or are they going to have like a zombie in their midst, or with Alien, it's the chest burster. Um, Here, it's the reverse zombie, because being bitten by a werewolf turns you into a werewolf, and these are strong, almost unstoppable creatures. It's because there are a couple of, again, I'm going to try and tiptoe around this, but there are a couple of wounded people in this movie that you're like, well, that's not going to end well. But over the course of the film, you start noticing, and at first I thought it was just a series of flubs. I'm like, well, this person shouldn't be quite as up and about as they are, until I gradually realized, oh, they're in the process of changing, but instead of getting weaker and going on to death's doorstep, they're transforming into something that's more powerful than they ever were as a regular person. And I wanted to stand up and applaud.
Right. And you're not hit over the head by a lot of things. There's not that making a film to the lowest common denominator mentality. It's you're free to discover things, put things together yourself. You're given uh, most all the information, whether they be subtleties or outright script pieces, but you've got all the information, but it's still not, you know, we don't spend an extra 25 minutes of film for exposition or, like, oh my God, I get it now. Let me reiterate what everybody should already know. So yeah, it's an intelligent film, I think, for being what it is. It's a werewolf movie. It's a movie about a bunch of people that get trapped in a house, have some military grade weapons, and they're trying to survive the night. You mentioned if the US had lived through the night, if the soldiers had lived through the night, and they converted back to humans, and what would that exchange be like? Like, it makes you wonder how much of this, because these do seem to be werewolves that retain a lot of their human motivations and awareness, whereas I
Hmm.
think we're very, very used to your time as a werewolf is spent completely blacked out as far as
Yeah.
your conscious mind. Maybe you have vague memories of like, oh, I think I woke up with blood all over me naked in a park and I have vague horrifying memories. But these werewolves almost seem like they're just craftier and, like you said, much far superior to the human body. Um, so yeah, who knows? That might have been an awkward meeting if like, hey, we couldn't take you out as werewolves and you've destroyed our house. So we've got guns too. I don't know. It was just been a interesting.
Well, that it poses a great moral dilemma because I didn't get a good look at the photograph, so I don't know if there are any children in that family. All the wolves that we see seem to be full grown. But what if there's like a 15-year-old teenage boy who is one of these things, and he comes to and he meets up with Cooper? Does Cooper kill him? Does he can't necessarily just let him go because he knows what he'll do to other innocent people, and we also know Cooper's code of ethics based on the opening scene. But he also doesn't necessarily want to turn him in because, and this is my 1% critique of the film, uh there is another kind of roundtable scene where they go into what Ryan and his team were doing out there, and my heart just sank because it was the one bit that was so obviously stolen from Aliens, down to, it's the special weapons division. They were sent out there by the government to retrieve the specimen to bring back so they could weaponize it, and then they used the other team as bait. That's all out of Alien and Aliens, and I was like, oh no, this movie is so much better than that. Fortunately, there are these little bits of twists and turns and tweaks to the story. Plus, that's like right before this bombardment of last half hour, third act, relentless action and surprise that, I pretty much forgot about my complaints until it was over. Um, but yeah, so he's not necessarily going to turn him into the government because he knows, not
Right.
that it's not so much that he's worried that the government would like dissect this poor little werewolf boy, but that they would turn him into a super weapon and then inflict him on other people. So yeah, it's like, again, this has nothing to do with the movie at hand, but if you step back and think about all the implications, you could write like 6 movies about this.
Yeah. And this, from what I've read, Marshall did create this with a trilogy in mind. Um, but then up until like 2020, he had been pretty open with like, no, at this point, I don't think there'll ever be a sequel, even. But then I did see something in 2021 where he alluded that maybe a sequel might be possible.
Hmm.
However, there is something called Dog Soldiers Fresh Meat on IMDb, which it's listed in 2017, unmade. It's just kind of a prospectus, and it has a small synopsis of, oh, who was it? There was some other team. Oh, I think they, at some point when they discover Captain Ryan's team has been, they're just blood and guts spread all over the place. They try and use the radio, but the radio has been ruined. They still try and repair it and get a call out, but then they wind up moving on immediately. Um, well, that call was actually picked up by a military unit. So the government sends out, it's a very short synopsis. You can just go to IMDb and get the gist, but sounds like it's what this team discovered. And
Hmm.
then some of Ryan's men uh, were changed. They weren't
Okay.
flat out eaten or killed. Um, so that team winds up dealing with, you know, expert soldiers who are now werewolves. So even more dog soldiery. Whereas in this one, I don't know what the official answer is, but you can look at dog soldiers as, oh yeah, the soldiers, they're killing these canids, so it makes sense. But is it really this pack of werewolves that have besieged their own den in order to kill off these intruders? And you know that that's almost more soldiery, and the way they work as a pack and get them to waste ammunition. And yeah, there's, like you said, there's a lot more than just the movie to ponder, which is true of The Descent as well. I think this one has pretty cut and dry. There's not a lot of mystery to it. I think we're given all the answers, but when you watch his next film, then you can start to go, oh wow, I'm just going to stay awake for 3 days and think about this one. But Dog Soldiers is it's just a fast paced blast of fun. Hour and 40
You
minutes of
know,
fun.
and I have to go back and rewatch The Descent because I think, if I remember correctly, I think we saw The Descent together um, in a theater.
Hmm,
I
okay.
have a recollection of this, and I remember not being impressed by it. And I think if I had seen Dog Soldiers, I might have been way more jazzed about Neil Marshall's next film. Not that I wouldn't have had problems with The Descent, but now that I know where The Descent kind of came from, like the movie that led up to it, they don't really have anything to do with each other, but just the writer director. Uh,
Right.
Maybe I can appreciate that a bit more. Plus, it's been 17 years since that thing came out. So yeah, I gotta give that another shot because I haven't watched it since the first time I saw it. But I do remember being very creeped out by the closing shot. Yeah, so, and I know Marshall has gone on to direct like a number of other films, and he did a bunch of stuff for Game of Thrones. Um, the idea of him doing a sequel to Dog Soldiers, while it's an interesting idea, I wonder how much of the brains and heart and practical special effects we would get from 2002 in a 2022,
Right.
carrying on. Like, has he become too slick? Has he learned too much to give something as scrappy as his debut?
Right. And that One thing I really want to talk about is how this film came to be. And he wrote it over, I think, four to 6 years. He was just kind of playing with it. And one of the producers, I can't quite remember which one, but in the one of the earlier DVDs, there's just a fantastic fan made um biography after the show, and it's got a lot of the cast, a ton of the crew, and Marshall all talking about their experience putting it together. And Marshall said he and it was one of two producers, and I don't want to guess which one. That would be insulting, but good friends, and they just would hit a pub every day and sit down and hammer out how are we going to get this onto the screen and do it justice, and tweaking things and planning things out. And this is before, eventually their talks went from how do we want to make this to, okay, how do we get the money to make this? And this was 2002, so early CGI was, you know it was the latest best thing you could do for a film, so a lot of people thought. But Marshall was adamant that no, we're going to do this practically, and it just wouldn't be the same film if these were CGI characters, especially 2002 CGI. But even now, would a sequel preserve all that time, all that love and care that went into the story? Would it preserve the practical effects? Yeah, there's I would rather go see something completely different and be surprised by that, and love on that.
Or even, take Marshall out of it, except for his eye for talent, and find the Neil Marshall who's trying to get their film off the ground today, you know,
There is,
and
yeah,
bring that up to the big screen. Yeah, it's again, it's really hard. It feels like it's got all the heart of a first film, but I still can't believe, possibly because of the caliber of the actors,
right.
but also everything looks so it's everything is so on point that you're like, how is this, it feels like, well, can anybody make a movie? And yes, anyone can make a movie, but yeah, I was in awe.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a
but
well assembled
yeah.
team.
Hmm?
That's a well assembled team. When you get the right special effects people, the right uh, screenplay writers, and the actors almost down to the last person have said, read the script, loved it. And Sean Pertwee even said, hey, it was, I think, 2 years before they were funded. He read the script and said, use my name. If it helps, use my name around town. And it did help. Having that name attached so early helped get the funding that they needed for the film. So
And
um
I only know him really from this movie now, and then from Event Horizon, where he played another kind of like irascible, like the ship's mechanic character. But in his final scene where he's digging through this, storage room trying to find the detonator that's going to blow up the ship, he finally finds it just as the readout is like 002, 001, and the last shot of his face where you can kind of see his lip quiver. I mean, for this movie, for Dog Soldiers, there was a point I actually wrote down when he's giving one of his many heartfelt like speeches. I'm like, did this guy like get nominated for or win a BAFTA for this damn thing? Because I know it's a genre picture, but this is, this performance again, it's ripping my heart out.
yeah, yeah, when he talks about I think there's a particular exchange that hits me every time, and it's in the kitchen when they've got Captain Ryan secured, but he's still being very aloof and very evasive with his answers. And Cooper brings it up first, like, three of our people have died. And then the Sergeant, Pertwee's character, those were people under his command. And he clearly feels that personally. And you truly believe it. And it is, it's just touching, to watch this guy act, and you believe that, God, I would follow that sergeant. Like, let's go back in time. Let's go to Nam. This is
Good times, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
But there is worth pitching here. A book came out recently. Janine Pipe. Did did I get that? Yes, I believe that is her name. I'm gonna really quick fact check myself here, but um, I caught the very tail end of a Kickstarter recently for a book called Sausages, which um, yeah, it is. Her name is Janine Pipe, and it's the making of Dog Soldiers. It's a pretty
Whoa.
hefty tome, and she paired up with Marshall himself to write this book, go behind the scenes, interview a ton of people. Um, I haven't read all of it, but it's a fantastic source. I haven't. I don't think I've spoiled anything from it because I have my own excitement about this film. So that's what we've gotten tonight. But if anybody is really interested in the making of, and just really kind of climbing in with the cast and crew to find out what it was like, um, fantastic book and available on Amazon.
Okay,
Uh,
so it was a Kickstarter, but it's on Amazon, is that right?
yeah, it was the successful Kickstarter to get it published, get it out, and it is now available on Amazon.
I gotta check that out. One of the things that started this conversation, or the genesis of it, is Scream Factory just put out Dog Soldiers on 4K Blu-ray, and there's a bunch of extra features and stuff, which I will talk about on a separate segment called Featured Extras. But I definitely, when I saw that, I was like, damn it, it's time for me to watch this movie that Chad's been, raving about for 20 years. And I'm so glad that we did, because not only is it great to be able to catch up with you, but it's just, yeah, it's always great to be, 45 years old and discover a new favorite movie like that is going in my lifetime canon. You know,
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
I,
What's that?
well, it reminds me of, and I know we're almost up, I'm up against the clock as always, but I don't know if you've watched the movie Prey on Hulu. It's the new Predator prequel.
Oh, I don't think I have watched that one.
You know, watching Dog Soldiers and now watching Prey, and pretty much it's I have a new gold standard now. I'm like, if you can't make an ensemble siege monster movie that at least tries and is at least as good as Dog Soldiers, you need to go back to the drawing board, because there's no excuse. This movie's 20 years old. It's already figured everything out, and you've got to either do better or pick a different genre, because this one's full up.
Yeah, and it'd be great to point to one thing and go, it's all the writing, or it's, the fantastic acting saved this. But it's an example of just everything good happening on all fronts. To, everybody that had a hand in this film should be should be terribly proud of themselves, because it did not, like I said, it didn't get a box office release in the US, which was sad, but it has become a cult favorite. And surprisingly, apparently Neil Marshall caught some kind of flack with it was an early DVD release. They shot this thing on 16 millimeter, and so it's kind of grainy by nature, and that's how I watched it for years. And there's nothing wrong with that.
With film grain.
It's yeah, with the film quality, because everything else is is the film I know and the film I love. But I guess there were some people that created some kind of fervor about like, oh, I bought a DVD and it's grainy. Like, you know what? They did that all. That
Well,
wasn't
it's
fun.
it's
It
funny
wasn't a
because
big production house.
well, it's that, and this is an argument that goes back, 20 years or more, because I know exactly what you're talking about, the whole idea of grain and having to educate people. It's kind of like the widescreen thing. Like, why are there black bars in the top and bottom of my screen? I'm losing a third of the picture. Like, no.
You're
But with film
actually
grain,
getting more.
right. But with film grain, there were people who complained, and I know on an earlier Blu-ray release of Predator, they went in and did a bunch of digital smoothing to take out the graininess, and everyone ended up like looking like wax dummies.
Yeah.
Um, and then people complained about that. So now film grain is popular because people understand what they're looking at, what they're supposed to be seeing. Um,
About
so
time.
yeah.
Yeah. But
Well,
that 4K edition, that is a remarkable piece to have because it was painstakingly gone, technicians had to go in and clean things up and, hopefully I'm sure it's a great job, but yeah, I'm glad that that happened for it, that there's a 4K recognition.
yes. All right. Well, I'm recognizing that it's, our hour is up, sir. I feel like this isn't, movie therapy or anything, but but I definitely feel good. So Chad, thanks so much again for Talking Dog Soldiers, for recommending it. And I'm still mad at you for not, forcing me to watch it earlier.
There are
With
some other films
you
out
you
there you might get tied to a chair. Careful
I
what you wish for.
take it all back. No, all right, Matt. Thanks again. Take it easy, and yeah, we'll catch you at some point soon talking about another. Are there any other movies that you think I should have seen by now that I obviously haven't?
Oh, not that I don't think you've seen. I think we need to talk to the Descent sometime, but yeah.
Deal. I
All
will I
right.
will give The Descent a
I love
second
it.
chance because that movie needs my official endorsement in order to be good, right? No.
Indeed, yeah.
All
All
right, man.
right.
Thanks, and we'll
Ian,
catch you later.
thank you.
All right, bye.